Morning. So, if you're anything like me, you've been watching the, well, with one eye, like watching the Mueller report come out. Um, and naturally, being astrologers, the first thing we do is we go rush to make a chart. Ooh, what will the stars tell us? Um, I don't typically get into mundane work, mostly because I'm more interested in the daily life, right? Listen, the world's going to do what the world's doing. We still have to go get through every day. But I am not immune to occasionally jumping to a chart like, oh my God, what's going on? Ah! So here's some interesting tidbits from the cosmos about what this all means. So now understand that I am not a mundane astrologer, so I'm not making any predictions about the House will do this and the Senate will do that, and the president and yada yada. Not that detailed because I'm just not that invested in that particular branch of astrology. However, we can still glean a lot from a chart not being a mundane astrologer. And here's what we have. So we know that the Mueller report was delivered around 5 p.m. on March 22nd. Now, the earliest time I can find for the actual breaking news is 5:06. But if you know anything about newscasting, especially live and on site, you got to give these guys a couple of minutes to confirm that something just happened, because they're not going to go like flying off the cuff here. And also then to at the speed of like Speedy Gonzalez, like get all their recording equipment set up and going, and then broadcasting live, right? This is breaking news. And that's going to take at least 4, 5, 6 minutes, right? I mean, it's not like that. It just doesn't happen like that, because the most important thing is they have to confirm that what they think just happened did just happen, right? And it's not like whoever's delivering the Mueller report is going to announce on their way in the building, oh, by the way, I'm delivering the Mueller report, because who wants to get mobbed by reporters, right? So the time we have is 5:06. I'm guessing it was probably about 5 p.m. Or just a little bit before 5 when that report went in, probably, and I'm guessing because I don't actually know the clerk hours. I would imagine they would have had to have gotten it in before the clerk's office closed, because it's the government bureaucracy, and we've got a record of all this stuff, right? So, and clerks don't play, man. It's quitting time. It's quitting time. But it's Washington. Maybe it's a little different there. So I'm guessing about 5, and that's going to give us about 5 or 6 minutes for the first broadcast, the earliest broadcast to come out that the report was delivered, for the reason I just said. Now, here's what's interesting about the timing of that. At 5 p.m., not even 5:06, at 5 p.m., one of the things that we're seeing is, you ready? The moon is void, of course. Now, for those of you who have read anything about astrology, you know that a void of course moon is problematic, because it's basically much ado about nothing, right? So void of course moons are good for some things, spectacularly good for some things, but for mundane, real life, real world, day to day kind of get the ball rolling sort of stuff, no. Moon void of course is when everything unplugs. They literally unplug your computer so you can forget getting any work done, at least for a couple of hours. Efficiently getting any work done. Not quite a Mercury retrograde, because even with a Mercury retrograde, you can still make some movement. You just have to like shore up some weak parts. With moon void, of course, starting things under a moon void, of course, are just pointless. Anyway, blah blah blah. The moon is void, of course, at the time this report was delivered, and what that tells me, your mileage may vary, is that this at this point is literally just a formality. There's nothing going to come of this, or of this report specifically, as it's been delivered. So there's a whole lot of wheels spinning and a whole lot of not moving, right? Like a hamster wheel going. It's going, but it's not going anywhere. And that's interesting. Now, this is only important because we expected this report to be a huge bombshell, right? Well, maybe not so much. And maybe it is, but it may not be the report itself that does it. So now what this is going to do, according to some other attorneys that I was reading about, that we're talking about what the next steps are. Like, this is just the beginning. There's a whole lot of other things that need to occur. It's a lot like a chess game, right? As opposed to checkers. So it may look like this, but in reality, it's something else. And apparently the thing about collusion, one of the things the attorney was stating is that the media is not understanding specifically how these things work. And with, oh my God, with government, the Constitution, and that kind of constitutional law, it is extremely complicated and messy. And dear Lord, I was getting confused just reading it. But ultimately, one of the reasons that no collusion was found is because Mueller was never investigating collusion. Mueller was investigating other things. So, of course, they couldn't find evidence of collusion because that's not what the report was about. The report was about obstruction of justice, which is a whole other animal. So, there are apparently numerous other things that will now fall into place, and the ticking of the clock has begun. So, it's not cut and dry, although this is certainly what they would have us believe. Now, and again, like the celebrations, depending on which side of this issue you're on, the celebrations are premature. They are definitely premature right now because the moon is void, of course. So this is not, it's not doing anything. This is a lame duck that's just been delivered. The other thing, and this is what I want you guys to watch, Mercury is still retrograde. So we know there's a lot of information being held back. Obviously, we're aware of that. But also because Mercury retrograde is still within a degree of Neptune, there's also deliberate obfuscation and deliberate covering up of things, hiding things. So Mercury is retrograde still, and it is within a degree of Neptune. Now, it is still within that degree of Neptune, very close, which means that there's a whole lot of misrepresentation and, propaganda going on, right? A lot of propaganda pushing. And just so you guys know, Neptune rules propaganda. So with that said, I'm totally convinced and will not be convinced otherwise that until until Mercury gets out of this Neptune orb, that we're not going to see a lot of playing with words and pushing, messages that are not false narratives and all that sort of stuff. The other thing is that this Mercury-Neptune conjunction, remember, Mercury will station direct in a few days on top of that Neptune. So all this, churning of the water, right? Blood in the water and sharks are coming. All this churning in the water, all this celebration, all this may be premature. There's a whole lot more to this story. This is nothing. Because remember, the moon is void, of course. When the report was delivered, this was literally just a formality that amounts to nothing. Because the real work, the engine is located elsewhere, right? So this is just like the flagman at the beginning of the train track. The train's way back there. This is nothing. So when Mercury goes direct on that Neptune, we can expect Mercury to stop, stand, spin, and turn around and move in the other direction. So all stuff is going to start on all this buildup of whatever it is we're looking at right now, which in this case is, celebration. Which is why I say, regardless of what side you're on, like the celebrations are a little premature. All of this is going to start unraveling very, very quickly, and especially as soon as Mercury gets away from Neptune and out of that orb. Now, the other thing is that when Mercury goes direct, watch Mercury going direct. So Mercury will go direct, and then it's going to square that Jupiter, and that's when we should expect some truth to come out, because Jupiter is the planet of foot and mouth disease, which is usually being a little too honest for everybody else's comfort. So Mercury will hit that degree of Jupiter, which is 23 Pisces to 23 Sag in April, right? So I would look for around the 11th, give or take a few days before or after. So around April 11th, that's when that Mercury will hit that Jupiter degree. Now, remember, Jupiter is in the sign of its own rulership. It is very, very strong, right? And we've been seeing it because Jupiter is about justice and truth and ethics and principles. It's about all those golden rules we live by. When Jupiter is in Sag, this is what's brought to the forefront. Since Jupiter's moved into Sagittarius, there's been a tremendous, thank God, emphasis and return to these things as important, right? Now, with Mercury squaring that, you've got two opponents that are challenging each other, right? And Mercury coming out of that Neptunian propaganda machine, and then there's Jupiter. It's just like, yo, dude, this is the real truth. Jupiter is stronger because Jupiter is in its own sign. It's the sign of its rulership. Mercury is in its fall. Mercury is in its weakest position in the sign of Pisces. So in terms of comparative strength for events and stuff, Jupiter is stronger and prevails in this combination that we're going to see play out around April 11th-ish, right? And certainly that first half of April, going to be dynamite. So all of this is to say that with Mueller Report, not everything is what it seems. Obviously, nothing is with this administration, right? But more importantly, there's a lot more going on that has everybody kind of joining forces and making an unspoken agreement amongst themselves, not to us, to kind of keep this quiet. And some things to consider, like if it were you and you were in charge of, let's say you're in charge of a group of people or a group of small children, you're in charge of people who knew less than you did about what's up ahead. And what's up ahead is pretty damn bad, right? And could be potentially life-threatening. Would you tell the entire group and set them into a panic? Right? No, of course not. You would never do that. Anybody who's got half a brain that's done any type of management or leadership knows, like, rule number 1, don't panic. Rule number 2, don't let them see you panic. And rule number 3, do not make other people panic. So there's a whole lot of mutual agreement on both sides, and with everyone around to kind of like, let's keep this as manageable as possible, because the last we need is pandemonium in the streets, right? So that is distinctly a possibility with whatever they're finding in this report. And that may be why everybody's working together to kind of keep this as non-incendiary as possible. Okay. Which doesn't mean that he is free and clear and exonerated and all those other lovely adjectives he and his supporters and his party would like to use. No, it just means that right now, he and his administration and his cronies may think they have the upper hand, and yet again, Teflon Don's going to walk away, but that's not the case. That's not the case at all. There's a whole lot going on here that we're not privy to. There's a whole lot we don't have, but hang on and fasten your seatbelts, because when April comes, it should all come charging out, right? That's when the fun begins. I was really hoping it would be a Mueller Report, but this is literally apparently just a formality, and this is the seed, right? Or this is the flagman at the end of the track warning us that the train is coming. All right, so I checked in with my my cohorts on the other side of the veil to see what they had to say about this. So I'm not getting specific detailed information because, well, we don't work like that, but certainly I would give it to you if I got it. But here's what I'm getting about the Mueller Report as we have right now. So there are some issues and some things that are going on right now. Timing is everything, and there's a sense of trying to navigate the situation and keep up appearances as best they can until they can get to higher ground, safer waters. The problem is, or the challenge here, is that it's not a single person that's on the hook. It looks like there's up to 10 people, like almost like a constellation around the president, that are definitely, not possibly, definitely on the hook. So we've got multiple things happening at the same time, like spokes on a wheel. All right. The other thing is, it looks like constitutional law is an issue here in a big way. So I'm not completely sure how that plays out, because I'm not a constitutional law expert. Boy, do I miss Obama. But it is there. And also, too, there are... One of the things that they're saying is just to wait, because there's more here, and there is some divine intervention that will occur. So this is not so cut and dry, but also, even though it may seem like it's all completely lost, it's not. There's some cosmic or divine intervention that's going to be at play here shortly. Ultimately, the outcome that I'm seeing is just going to be a whole lot of mess and chaos, and ooh, boy, this is going to be expensive and messy. Expensive and messy. There's going to be a whole lot of hurt feelings floating around. Not to mention a lot of... I want to say embarrassment, but there's definitely going to be a whole lot of discomfort where financial investments are concerned, and not just for the president, but also for a lot of other people around him. So it may be that a lot of Congress is going to end up having their finances exposed in ways they weren't expecting. But what I'm also seeing at the end of this is some type of offer or plea, and a lot of happiness surrounding the outcome of this. So he may be offered a deal like Nixon was offered a deal and graciously sat down, or it could be other people are offered a very sweet deal to keep them out of jail, as it were, which helps remove him or something. I'm not sure what this is because I'm not a Constitution person, but it will end well. It will end well. So the most important thing right now with the Mueller report is don't put too much energy into this. The moon was void, of course, and the report was delivered. Mercury's retrograde conjunct Neptune, where it's about to station direct at this, literally on Neptune in a few days. There's a whole lot more here than just this. This was just a formality. So we'll see how this goes. And remember, April, that first half of April, definitely around the 11th, whew, that's when like it's really going to hit the fan. So that's when we should see some action and where the real meat of this matter is. All right, so there you go. Stay tuned. Just a little footnote. So mundane astrology is a branch of astrology that studies mundane events or world events, right? External, circumstantial things. And it's pretty interesting. I'm not a huge participant in it because I'm more about you and your life and how to get you moving in the right direction. Because all of that is just stuff, right? So a couple of little notes I want to give you if you guys decide to start pursuing that particular focus in astrology, or if you're just curious about it, because you'll hear like astrology for pretty much everybody. You're going to hear a whole lot of stuff from people who are self-proclaimed experts. Read a book last week. I'm an expert today. Or I've been practicing astrology for 100 years and I still don't know what I'm talking about. Spilling tea. Anyway, so with mundane astrology, it is literally an observation of the correlations between world or external events or events in the world as opposed to the individual, and the astrology chart itself. Now, here's what's important to understand about that. So there are there are a lot of, because it's a new study, right? So there's a lot of, it's a newly revisited study. So there's a lot of desire to make mundane astrology predictive astrology. So we can predict events by looking at the mundane chart. Yeah, maybe not. We don't have enough information. I'm sure there's a way to turn chart or to do a derivative chart to actually get that kind of information. But just using your standard wheel and chart system like we do for basically everything will not necessarily yield you predictive results. So don't put too much stock into prediction using mundane work, okay? The other thing that I want to emphasize that people keep forgetting, especially when it comes to predictive work or anything else with an astrology chart, the astrology chart is a mirror, okay? It's not a predestined prognosticator of things to come. So we can absolutely see patterns developing in the course of a timeline for a person or a business or an event or a large group of people. Anything that has a moment of inception when it becomes real in the world, there's a timeline involved, and there's a set of experiences that we can predict will come into play at different points along the timeline. But at any given time, these things are mirrors of what's happening down here. Now, this all gets into a little weird, like quantum physics, metaphysical reality shaping sort of stuff, but understand that what we're seeing is a mirror, not a prognosticator. So at any given time, like with the Mueller report that just came out, this is not necessarily a prognosticator of things to come as much as it is a mirror of the event, and from there we can make guesses and predictions about which way this is logically going to go based on our astrological knowledge. And this of course gets into this thing, well, if we can see it in a chart, it's going to happen in the future, doesn't that mean it's predestined? Maybe. If you buy into Einstein's idea of time, and that time is not a linear thing, it doesn't run from one point to the other, time is actually coexisting simultaneously all at the same time. Past, present, and future are all happening right now, right? I mean, we're getting some weird stuff here. If you buy into that, it's entirely possible that it makes more sense that this mirror that we're seeing right now is also mirroring future events because it's all happening simultaneously. I know. It's more complicated than I can even explain, much less kind of sort of. I only sort of understand this. But the idea is that it's not happening in a straight line from here to here, and that we're kind of marking off things that are predestined to happen. All potential lives in the moment that something comes into existence. So an astrology chart helps us map out what those potentials are and what the most likely manifestations are at any given time, depending on the other factors and influences. So there's that. The other thing, just a sidebar about the United States and predicting events for the country and all that sort of stuff. The United States is a special case because we're essentially a brand new country compared to other cultures and other countries. We're like a baby country and a baby culture. Okay, so you figure like Italy's been around forever, ever. Italy, Greece, Great Britain, Scotland, all these places, the Middle East, all these places have been around for a long time. But the United States as an entity in the modern world is fairly new. And our democracy is definitely new. So in a lot of ways, the United States is, it is literally, oh, my hair's being weird. It's literally a living experiment in a new way of self-government for people. Okay, because remember back in the day, you didn't have governments, you had kings. Or gods, gods who became mortal and were, appointed kings or whatever. So you didn't have people governing themselves. You had and typically a ruler that that received their rulership by divine right, through their birth line, of, oh my God. We don't have that anymore. We've had a lot of different offshoots of people attempting to govern the masses or doing a lot of self-governing for the people. But the democracy as it's practiced here in the United States is very, very new. It is a living experiment. Very Aquarian, very Aquarian. So the problem, of course, is for us is we don't necessarily have, there's a lot of conversation about what the actual birth date of the United States is. So lots of different astrologers use lots of different charts, and there's always somebody trying to be more clever. We'll try and come up with a new date and time that's the correct one. So you may see multiple USA charts floating around with different times, not just July 4th, 1776. The Constitution has its own chart as well, and all that sort of stuff. So when you get into this, it can be very overwhelming. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, and don't become too much of a diehard a proponent of any particular school of thought, because we are learning, and the practice of mundane astrology being revisited is as new and a learning process for many of us as the Constitution and modern democracy is, as practiced by the United States as an example of how this works and doesn't work for the rest of the world. So I just wanted to share that with you. And as always, keep your sense of humor, keep your eyes open, pay attention, and understand that fatalistic interpretations are not really what this is about. What we're looking for is the essence of an experience, because everything in life and in astrology is about evolution and becoming the better version of yourself at any given time, even if you're a country.